Listen closely. 3 major breaks hit this week's file. 3 separate details from totally different directions. When we put them on the board, when we actually line up the timeline and analyze the evidence, the entire scope of this investigation shifts. Most people are missing the pattern. So you and I are going to slow down and unpack this case file piece by piece. First up, the Nancy Guthrie missing person case just gained massive celebrity traction. We got a detailed forensic breakdown from a highly credible retired FBI profiler, plus a sudden public statement from Sheriff Chris Nanos directly addressing the evidence. A statement that completely contradicts the facts the FBI director laid out days prior. Over 100 days in, and the case just fractured further. Let us dig in, starting with Khloe Kardashian. Now, as an analyst, I get your skepticism. How does Khloe Kardashian factor into the Nancy Guthrie investigation? She is no detective. She is definitely not a forensic profiler. She is not even an investigative journalist. She is a reality star. Right, but from a tactical standpoint, that is exactly what matters. Khloe commands over 300 million followers across her networks. 300 million. That is an absolute megaphone, not just the true crime community echoing the same theories. It is a massive global reach. Viewers who typically ignore missing person cases and police reports. People who normally skip past any investigative deep dives. People who would never encounter Nancy Guthrie's file unless someone with massive reach broadcast it. And this week, she did just that. She named her on the podcast Khloe in Wonderland. She sat down with Ashley Flowers, the crime junkie host, and she voiced an observation that many of us analysts share, but frankly, it rarely gets delivered with such blunt force on such a massive mainstream platform. She said, "Nancy Guthrie, is that not heartbreaking? This is 2026. There is nothing like we don't that is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. Her exact literal phrasing there. And she blasted that directly into an audience that completely eclipses any crime network. She handed those clues to people tracking her for fashion and lifestyle, viewers entirely blind to the Nancy Guthrie file, until Khloe practically logged it into evidence. Let us pause the timeline here. You and I need to address a critical variable that the standard media coverage is completely failing to evaluate. What shifts when massive celebrity influence intercepts an active cold case? Look at the historical data, because the precedent is clear and the impact is highly strategic. Pull up the Gabby Petito records from 2021. She was a 22-year-old woman who vanished without a trace mid-road trip. That investigation blew wide open, partly from the suspicious timeline, but largely because social channels forced a level of viral exposure we rarely witness. TikTok creators' giant Instagram pages, massive digital footprints, hijacking the narrative and shoving it in front of demographics that traditional police press conferences never touch. The resulting civilian pressure, that sheer, overwhelming crowdsourced surveillance, forced law enforcement to accelerate their physical search parameters drastically. Or examine the Elizabeth Smart file. Her father stated on record that relentless media scrutiny and that constant, intense public friction were the exact tactical advantages that brought her home alive. A civilian spotted her from the broadcasts and tipped police. The systemic pressure worked. So when Khloe hits the mic calling the Nancy Guthrie evidence mind-blowing for 300 million listeners, that is way beyond idle Hollywood chatter. That signals a massive shift in public data gathering, and frankly, for an active grid search lacking a prime suspect on paper. Facing a backlog of over 30,000 unchecked leads, this surge in public visibility is critical. Because logically, the witness holding the missing puzzle piece probably ignores true crime dossiers and police scanners, but they likely scroll past Khloe Kardashian. They could be streaming her show on a morning commute, suddenly catch a familiar suspect name out of nowhere, and their brain just clicks. Wait, I actually recognize that detail. That is how real leads generate. That is how deadlocks shatter, not always through a shiny new DNA match. Sometimes it takes one random civilian unexpectedly catching a signal that finally connects a dot they had totally overlooked. Look at the transcript, though. Khloe did not stop at mind-blowing. She kept digging. She literally noted all the things I was reading about the brother-in-law and that kind of stuff. Oof. She pointed out the ransom notes going to all the media outlets first. Highly irregular protocol there. Ashley Flowers backed her up, assessing that investigators are withholding key files from the public, a standard operational tactic for protecting an ongoing case. Let us be strictly factual here. The Sheriff's Department officially cleared the immediate family of suspicion. That directly includes Tommaso. As an analyst, I will never draft theories that the police actively rule out, but mark my words on this final point. When Khloe Kardashian drops an observation about the brother-in-law across a platform with that staggering broadcast radius, let's look at this case together. That exact conversation is hitting 300 million households today. That completely reshapes the public pressure crushing this investigation. Full stop. But as an analyst, here is the question that keeps me awake. What if Khloe is simply the beginning? Because once a star speaks out, once a platform that massive throws this true crime case at their audience, other people take note. Other major figures who have quietly tracked this mystery might finally feel authorized to speak up. They might think, if Khloe went public, I can too. And what happens if this snowballs? What happens if 5 major stars speak out? 10. What happens if this suspect gets enough relentless media heat to force the investigation onto the front page every single morning? We already know Sheriff Nanos reacts heavily to public pressure. The Board of Supervisors is already circling him. The bureau director has openly condemned him. Now, a star with 300 million followers calls the lack of arrests mind-blowing. Look, I need to be completely honest here. Viral fame does not close files. Hard evidence closes them. DNA closes them. Solid tips close them. But mainstream attention keeps a case breathing out in the open long enough for fresh evidence to actually drop. Long enough to break a witness. Long enough for whoever is hiding facts to realize this nightmare is staying put and they need to speak up about what they know. So Khloe Kardashian stated, "It is totally mind-blowing that we have nothing after 100 days. Honestly, she is absolutely right, and the louder people get the better. All right, stick with me. We need to analyze the second major break this week. This one arrives from a source carrying a completely different level of investigative weight. Retired Bureau Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clemente. 22 years in the Bureau. A profiler who spent his entire life analyzing violent offenders, tracing their psychological patterns, and hunting down the exact operational blunders that got them caught. This week, he dropped a specific term regarding the Nancy Guthrie suspect. I honestly believe it is the most crucial takeaway we have had since that doorbell video leaked online. He called the suspect totally bumbling. That might sound like a throwaway comment. It is definitely not. Let me break down why. For months, a massive debate has been fracturing this whole criminal investigation. Is the attacker on that porch sophisticated or completely amateur? Because on one side, you see the chilling organization required to map this out. The stalking, the tight timeline, the sedatives used, the escape path, all that screams professional operation. It shows heavy planning and discipline. Yet on the flip side, we have to evaluate the actual footage. The dumb branches jammed over the lens, the glowing reflective tape stuck on the suspect's backpack, a weapon holster completely misaligned, and the overall clumsy vibe of a guy who clearly did not think his own plan all the way through. And our primary question remains, which half of that profile actually exposes the real killer? Clemente gave an answer, and it is incredibly highly specific. He stated on record that the suspect revealed a visible wrist tattoo. That is a massive error that never happens if a killer actually preps for a security camera. Clemente concluded this guy is simply not a sophisticated offender. He was bumbling his way through this hit, making critical mistakes that will undeniably lead to his direct capture. All right, let's look at this together, because every single detail here is critical evidence. First up, the tattoo. Law enforcement has refused to publicly verify that specific marking yet. But after scrutinizing the raw doorbell video, Clemente spotted what clearly resembles an ink mark exposed on the attacker's right wrist. Barely visible. While scrambling to block that lens, the guy's sleeve shifted just enough to flash his bare skin for a split second. Think about what that implies for our profile. Someone who truly prepped for surveillance. A suspect who mapped out every exact detail to beat that specific property's security feed would have covered up. They would have taped their wrists, ensuring absolutely zero skin showed before they ever dared to step into frame. That is day one operational security for a repeat offender. Our target completely failed to do that. Then, while frantically improvising a sloppy fix for a security camera, he completely failed to anticipate. He exposed perhaps the most identifying physical trait on his entire body, a permanent wrist tattoo that the Bureau now holds in high definition. Stop right there. You and I know exactly what this means forensically. Tattoos leave records. Cops photograph them during every booking. They get logged directly into massive criminal databases. Eyewitnesses remember them. They act as the perfect physical anchor during a genetic genealogy hunt to rapidly filter out and cross-reference multiple suspects. If the DNA extraction at Quantico flags a target, and agents verify that name against a wrist tattoo matching the footage exactly that, becomes undeniable corroborating evidence. That is the exact proof a prosecutor needs in court. Clemente guaranteed those amateur mistakes will directly cause this guy's arrest. That is not just a theory. Let's examine this evidence together because his next point is crucial. It is a detail we need to unpack. He pointed out that when that doorbell security footage went public, seeing their own face plastered on television would trigger severe psychological shock. Any roommate or partner standing near the suspect right then would absolutely spot a massive shift in their baseline behavior. Put on your analyst hat for a second. Imagine sitting at home scrolling online and suddenly spotting your own image across every single breaking news alert, clearly labeled as the prime suspect in the kidnapping of Savannah Guthrie's mother. Yet you still have to play it completely cool, commute to your job, chat normally with your next-door neighbors, text your family back. You must fake absolute normalcy, fully knowing that every federal agent nationwide is analyzing that exact same video clip you are staring at. Profiler Jim Clemente argues hiding that level of internal panic is virtually impossible to pull off seamlessly. Somebody in their orbit spotted a behavioral red flag that felt completely off. A disproportionate emotional reaction, a sudden massive spike of paranoia coming entirely out of nowhere. Canceling social plans abruptly, a drastic routine shift starting right around February 10th, the exact date the FBI broadcasted that footage to the public. And if the witness who caught those signs is listening, if that specific memory is still eating away at their conscience, then the statement Khloe Kardashian made this week applies directly to their situation right now. Because this criminal investigation just gained massive renewed traction, that viral momentum is exactly the pressure that gets a reluctant witness to finally call a tip line. I need to analyze Jim Clement's theory about the suspect bumbling, which warrants a hard look. Skeptics are going to argue this point. They will say, if this person bumbled so badly, why has it taken over 100 days? If there are all these mistakes, why is nobody in custody? That is a fair analytical question, right? But here's the reality of casework. Blundering does not mean the clues are instantly visible. It just means forensic traces exist. Uncovering them demands serious patience.
Someone needs to do the right
It
thing.
requires intense lab work. Processing scenes demands the exact methodical forensics that C.C. Moore, Estra Forensics, and the FBI laboratory at Quantico are actively executing as we speak. Jim Clemente never suggested this missing person case closes in a week. He means the physical proof exists. The perpetrator's errors are locked inside the crime scene data, and the specialized units working this file, the actual analysts grinding away, not the officials doing press, are hunting those specific errors down. Once secured, that forensic evidence will absolutely stick in court. There is a crucial detail buried inside the IB Times report this week. It was quietly tucked away in the sidebar of their coverage. And honestly, most case trackers missed it. Tommaso has reportedly stepped down from teaching. Let me restate that fact. Tommaso, the advanced placement biology teacher from a Tucson charter school, the final known person to see Nancy Guthrie alive, the driver who brought her home January 31st, has left his classroom. He and Annie Guthrie are allegedly off the grid. Look, I am not declaring guilt here. The local sheriff's department officially cleared the family, and individuals process intense media scrutiny and psychological trauma using vastly different coping mechanisms. It is highly probable that the crushing weight of public attention on Tommaso The wild online theorizing and the relentless pressure made maintaining a public-facing job completely unsustainable for him. From a behavioral standpoint, that makes sense. But when you and I chart that anomaly alongside the 40-day impound of his vehicle for forensic sweeping, plus the repeated FBI field interviews at his house post-clearance, and the heavily redacted 911 audio, it builds an investigative
And
matrix
it
we
is
must track very
unthinkable
closely.
that those
Accusations
thoughts
aside, he is out of the school. They are hiding out, and Jim Clemente firmly believes the suspect's slip-ups will guarantee a final capture. All right, let us transition to the third major operational development this week. This specific update flashes the biggest warning signs because we have a glaring narrative collision between two top-tier law enforcement commanders. And logically, only one official is providing the accurate timeline. Sheriff Chris Nano gave People magazine an exclusive sit-down. You and I need to parse his exact wording because while it reveals fresh intelligence, it simultaneously fractures the official timeline. Let us isolate the newly verified data. He stated investigators are focused on digital evidence, specifically thousands and thousands of videos. Thousands of videos that investigators are working through. Consider the massive operational load of that exact volume. That means processing security cameras, Ring doorbells, municipal traffic feeds, and local storefront cameras. You and I need to examine the cameras covering every possible escape route from the night of January 31st into February 1st. Videos from the Catalina foothills, from roads heading south straight toward the border, from intersections tracking along Interstate 19 to the Engales crossing and the surrounding areas. That is a massive digital footprint to analyze, and we are over 100 days in. That leaves us with two distinct possibilities. Either the sheer volume of data is truly that overwhelming, and detectives are still digging, or there is a very specific clue in that footage that they are tracking. Quietly hunting down right now, a suspect vehicle, an exact route, a face building, an airtight case before going public. Either way, thousands of videos is a massive detail. It tells me this digital forensics investigation is much wider than early public reports led us to believe. It confirms the evidence trail they are actively chasing goes way beyond one doorbell camera and a single glove dumped 2 miles away. It spreads outward along highways, connecting timestamps across a vast camera grid between Nancy Guthrie's front door and wherever she was ultimately taken. Sheriff Nanos also confirmed that public tips are still rolling in daily. He mentioned that even a call from last night, 102 days later, matters because it might be someone reporting something highly suspicious in their local neighborhood. He brought up a fair point that we have to acknowledge as investigators. The sheriff himself does not run the actual field work. His dedicated unit handles that. There are multiple forensic specialists assigned to this team, providing the real talent. And he stated that attacking the forensic experts actually doing the heavy lifting, the ones analyzing the raw physical evidence, is completely shameful. Now, I want to be completely objective here because that is a very rational argument to make. The ground-level detectives and crime scene techs working this case did not choose to keep the FBI out on day one. They never picked the lab for the DNA evidence. Those executive calls happened way above their pay grade. Sheriff Nanos is absolutely right that the rank-and-file officers deserve full respect for grinding through this difficult investigation. But, and this is a massive investigative red flag, Nanos flatly denied blocking the FBI for 4 days. He claims federal coordination started right after learning of NY's disappearance. He forcefully pushed back on accusations that the initial crime scene was heavily mismanaged. He insisted the helicopter search launched immediately. Okay. So let's pause right here, because you and I are looking at a glaring public contradiction between the current director of the FBI and the sitting Pima County sheriff. Kash Patel went on Sean Hannity's podcast and stated officially under his own name that the FBI was locked out for 4 days. He claimed hundreds of federal agents were standing by with a fixed-wing plane waiting to fly evidence straight to Quantico. He added that the sheriff's department sent the DNA to a private lab in Florida instead. Meanwhile, Chris Nanos swore joint coordination kicked off instantly after the disappearance, that the aerial units were deployed immediately. They executed their protocol perfectly. Right, Well, both accounts cannot be true. Either the feds were actually delayed for 4 days, meaning Nanos is lying directly to the local community, or they were never delayed, meaning the FBI director went on a massive national broadcast and completely fabricated a story about a sitting local law enforcement official. Only one scenario happened, and both cannot be true. I have said this before, and I will say it again. My analyst instincts lean heavily toward believing Kash Patel here. Not because of any grudge against Nanos, but because the FBI director is a federal executive making very specific public claims under his exact name. He cited 4 exact days. He mentioned hundreds of agents. He detailed a fixed-wing aircraft. Those are concrete operational facts, not vague, blurry impressions. And the sheer institutional blowback of making up those exact details on national media would be absolutely catastrophic. The Bureau does not let its director casually throw a local sheriff under the bus on the record unless they possess the hard evidence to back it up. Then we must also examine the Board of Supervisors. A bipartisan duo of county supervisors, Democrat Matt Hines and Republican Steve Christie, have both openly demanded that Nanos resign. Christie specifically pointed out that there is zero mystery why this tragic missing persons investigation is such a total disaster, blaming the catastrophic failures squarely on the sheriff's own shoulders. End quote. On May 12th, the board invoked a very rare territorial-era statute to legally force Nanos to give sworn testimony regarding his professional background and his leadership. Sworn binding testimony answering for his work history and the critical investigative choices he has made. You and I know boards rarely interrogate sheriffs they trust. So when Nanos tells People magazine federal coordination was flawless and began without delay, and that the investigation is operating exactly as intended, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt where I can. But as an analyst, I simply cannot ignore what the FBI director definitively stated or what the Board of Supervisors is actively doing. You and I need to look at the math here. Sergeant Aaron Cross, someone inside that department, called Week 1 total chaos. Over 100 days, no arrests, no named suspect, and zero proof of life. Add a sheriff facing compelled sworn testimony over whether he actually lied on his own resume. That is the backdrop, while Sheriff Nanos claims everything is fine, and they are closing in daily. Right. Let us pull all these threads together. When you line up these 3 major case developments side by side, Khloe Kardashian, Jim Clemente, and Sheriff Nanos, a very specific, undeniable picture starts to form. Let me break down exactly what this evidence is telling us. First up, the public pressure surrounding this missing person case is rapidly expanding. When Khloe Kardashian calls something mind-blowing on a massive podcast that is not just some quick 24-hour media blip, that is an unsolved mystery slamming back into the cultural mainstream at a totally unignorable volume. If more heavy hitters follow suit, if huge public platforms keep shouting Nancy Guthrie's name, the heat on every single agency working this investigation skyrockets. The local sheriff, the FBI, the crime labs, everyone. In criminal analytics, massive public pressure is everything. It drives the tip lines. It keeps potential witnesses awake at night. It makes whoever is hiding secrets paranoid enough to finally break and come forward. $1.2 million is already waiting. Stack relentless celebrity spotlight on top, and the math for an accomplice shifts dramatically. Point 2. Jim Clemente dropped a detail this week that actually sparks real hope. Not saying an arrest is imminent, but confirming the physical evidence exists and will eventually talk. He called the suspect bumbling. He believes those amateur mistakes guarantee a capture. In that key detail, he highlighted the exposed tattoo in the doorbell footage is exactly the physical marker that becomes explosive when crossed with the genetic genealogy tracing happening down at Quantico right now. If CC Moore pulls a target name from that DNA, and they have a wrist tattoo matching our video, that is not circumstantial. That is rock-solid corroboration. That builds a conviction, and Clemente's behavioral profile matters just as much. He noted that when those security frames dropped, the suspect definitely panicked, and someone in their inner circle absolutely noticed it. Somebody out there is still holding on to that red flag. They could be watching my breakdown right now. They might be buried in Khloe Kardashian's followers. This very broadcast might finally push them 1 inch closer to calling the authorities. Stick with me here. Sheriff Nanos's People interview actually revealed a solid clue despite its contradictions. Thousands of video files. As an investigator, that tells me the digital footprint stretches way past what the public has seen. It proves detectives are mapping out a specific geographic route. They are tracking secret timestamps they have kept tightly sealed, and that tedious grind is slowly pointing toward a suspect. He also confirmed fresh tips are still hitting on day 102. That is simply not cold case terminology. That is the sound of an active manhunt with burning leads. Of course, none of this fixes the bizarre contradictions from Kash Patel's statements. It still does not explain why crucial DNA collected dust in Florida for 11 weeks when the FBI offered a plane immediately. And it certainly does not explain why local supervisors are forcing sworn testimony out of the sheriff running the entire show. But it proves the gears are absolutely still turning. Hidden from our view inside a California lab or buried deep in a Quantico database, or locked inside a surveillance timeline pulled from traffic cameras along that southern desert highway. So what do you and I actually know for sure? As an analyst, I have to be brutally honest about these blind spots because the missing pieces are critical.
Now. Yes.
We still have no idea where Nancy Guthrie is, or if she is even alive. We cannot positively identify the suspect in that doorbell footage. We do not know if that Quantico DNA profile has triggered a single match yet. We are totally blind to whatever audio is on that sealed 911 call. We do not understand why Annie Guthrie's car was impounded for 40 days if the family was officially cleared. We have no clue why Tommaso suddenly stopped teaching, and we definitely cannot verify those lost 4 days, where Kash Patel claims the FBI was entirely sidelined, a claim Sheriff Nanos swears is completely fabricated. These are massive black holes. These are the pillars of the case, and past day 100, the public is completely in the dark. But that does not mean the detectives are blind. The FBI lab knows exactly what that DNA revealed. And the analysts scrubbing thousands of video files have absolutely found something. Let's look closely. The behavioral profilers tracking those bumbling mistakes Jim Clemente flagged have almost certainly narrowed their focus. They just aren't sharing it with us yet. Retired FBI agent Jeff Wood, who teaches alongside Dr. Ann Burgess at Boston College, put it perfectly. Law enforcement is not a media company. They are building an airtight courtroom case. Every single detail they keep locked down right now is evidence that retains its full weight when it hits a jury box. So that silence, it isn't emptiness. That silence means preparation. All right, let me leave you with something very direct. This active investigation desperately needs more voices. Not just Khloe Kardashian, we need more. Every public figure quietly tracking this. Every single celebrity sitting back and wondering. Every influencer with a platform who thought about speaking up but held back say something. From an analyst's view, the math is simple. The more people tracking Nancy Guthrie's name, the higher our chances of finding a witness who recognizes that suspect footage, or someone who suddenly acted strange on February 10th when those images dropped. We need eyes that saw a vehicle out on a desert dirt road early February 1st, pulling this entire investigation closer to the one phone call that breaks it wide open. Jim Clemente noted those initial mistakes will guarantee a capture. Dr. Ann Burgess reminded us every spiderweb has a center. Maureen O'Connell said the silence never holds. $1,200,000 says someone already knows. And now, Khloe Kardashian, projecting to 300 million followers, called it mind-blowing that this case remains unsolved in 2026. She is absolutely right. It is mind-blowing, and we have to stop accepting this as normal. Savannah Guthrie posted an update on Mother's Day. We miss you with every breath. We will never stop looking for you. We will never be at peace until we find you. 100 days later, and her mother is still missing. The pacemaker inside Nancy Guthrie's chest is actively running, still logging data, still tracking every single moment she's been gone. All that biological data recorded after 2:28 a.m. on February 1st. It is still locked inside a matchbox-sized device, ticking away inside an 84-year-old woman who deserves to come home. If you know anything, dial 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can stay completely anonymous. That $1,200,000 reward remains unclaimed. Keep analyzing this case with me. I'll update you soon.